I'd like to call this meeting of the Finance Committee to order. The date is the 27th of June. The time is 3:02. With us today, we have Alderman Tolliver, Alderman Bade, Alderman Warman, Alderman Bug, and myself, Alderman Franco. First item is 24-0468, approval of the minutes from the Finance Committee meeting held on June 13, 2024.
Second.
We have a motion by Alderman Bade, second by Alderman Warman. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Madam Clerk, anybody from the public wishing to speak?
We do not have anyone signed up today.
Okay, thank you. All right. We'll go to the body of the agenda. First item is 24-0473, a resolution authorizing the Third Amendment to the Second Amended and Restated Lease between Wholesome Mamar Incorporated, formerly known as Lafarge Aggregates, Illinois, and the City of Aurora.
Good afternoon, Bob Lively, Superintendent of the Water Production Division. So let me start by saying I'm going to call this a cleanup item of the same item that went through this committee last November, and it was approved by City Council in December. However, it was not fully executed by Wholesome. And the reason why, the original purpose was to extend the lease deadline, which was incorporated into the Third Amendment, the original Third Amendment, which is now basically void. They had asked for some additional language to be included in the Third Amendment. So this is where we're at now. This will be the actual Third Amendment. And basically, this project, as you know, has been ongoing for a while with the city working with Wholesome to eventually dispose of lime residual material into the mined out areas of the mine. And the longstanding understanding with the city and Wholesome is that they would continue to be able to operate and remove aggregate and mine the mine, whether we put lime sludge material in there or not. And so this Third Amendment actually just formalizes what their council asked for, was to include that in this amendment, that if the mine disposal project doesn't go forward for any reason, that they're still going to be allowed to mine out the third level of the mine, in which the city receives royalties for that.
Questions or comments from the committee? And some of this is basically, we're waiting for the IEPA. I mean, that's kind of what to make their ruling on this, I guess, is what we're looking at.
Right. Yeah, so last year, actually, the city did pass legislation with the General Assembly, and it was signed into law by the governor that allows this process to go through. But the rulemaking part of that is the onerous part that we're working with both sides, councils, myself, some of their technical staff. We're working with IEPA to craft language that will permit this officially. What will be the conditions? What will both parties have to do to allow it to go forward?
Okay. So obviously, this is something that a lot of these entities have never encountered before. So it's
Yes.
setting it's like a precedent type of thing.
Yeah, the IEPA has encountered the UIC program allows material to be disposed of in a different manner.
Mm-hmm.
The original design was to pump our lime slurry material to the mine up the road through a force main, and that was sort of viewed as a very expensive and overly technical project to maintain long term. Then we came up with the approach to just continue to process and dry the material at the plant like we do now, and haul it and place it in the mine. So it's no different than what we do now. We haul it to farm fields or we haul it to a landfill. This will be a much more economical option for the city going forward once it's in place and operating.
Sure. Okay. Any other questions or comments from the committee?
Motion to approve. Second.
We have a motion by Alderman Warman, second by Alderman Tolliver. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is 24-0484, resolution accepting the assignment of the contractual rights and responsibilities of the Seize the Future Economic Development Foundation, Investor Aurora, for the purchase of certain real property located on Bilter Road, and authorizing the city's officers and employees to complete the transactions contemplated by said contracts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. David Debo, Director of Economic Development of the city. Yes, this is regarding a matter that you probably have seen before in the closed session a couple of weeks ago, and the reason we had brought that in the closed session was at that point all these properties were not under contract, and we wanted to make sure that we did two things. One is kept the confidentiality, and two, got a sense from you in terms of whether you thought this was a good direction to go. And based on that, we continued and we got all the properties under contract. And now we're requesting the assignment. This is all done through Invest Aurora, which is how we tend to do these things. And now we're taking the assignment of those contracts. And closings will happen because there's 7 different lots. There's a number of different owners. So this will come over a period of a couple of months. The total acquisition price, as we speak about in the second, and the purpose, $5,891,000. Just to review what we spoke about in the other session and earlier, is that this is, even though it's in the Aurora municipal boundary, it actually is in unincorporated Kane County. And the concern here was twofold. One was that there was a lot of interest to do an industrial project, or a number of industrial projects right in this location. There was a specific request to do a large industrial building, and a second request from the property owner just to the west to expand slightly to the east and create a larger industrial property. So that's something that in this residential-oriented neighborhood we didn't want to have happen. The second point is that there's a real synergy between having residential here, the properties around it, and what's happening in the 50 acres where we intend to do the sports complex. And we've done that RFQ, and we'll be telling you more about that as time develops. But this would be very much in keeping with that property. The idea here would be to get these properties under contract, close on the properties, and then immediately do an RFQ. We're working on the RFQ now. We've had a lot of interest already from developers, but we bring the RFQ out, and we have a very strong feeling that we would be able to sell the property for at least the cost that we have have the properties under contract. Some of the details we could talk about, but with that, I could open up for any questions.
Well, I have a question to start off. So when these companies wanted to expand industrial, who did they go to? Did they go to us, they go to the township, or do they go to the county to explore that?
It's actually both. Very often they do come to us, looking for the annexation and so on. So, sometimes they do come to us. And we're in a little bit of a quandary here because our own master plan actually talks about industrial as well over there. So it's a little bit of a catch-22, and that's why we wanted to move some of these properties. We can't rezone them because they're not, within our jurisdiction to do so. So that's a situation where we wanted to move on it, but we really felt just to protect the residents out there, it was the right thing to do. But we do think it's an opportunity, and we've tested the pricing with some of these interested parties, and it seems like we would be purchasing it at the right price. Very similar to what we did down the road. I don't think we'll have the kind of profit that we would, that deal we bought for $450 a foot, and those properties are worth over $10 a square foot. This property be, closer to $7 a square foot. So still under maybe what, it's hard to say apples to apples, but certainly in the market range. Not 10, 11 really represented some of the larger properties, so they could do the data centers. The data centers could pay more. The industrial people could pay a lot more in residential often, and the data center people could pay a lot more than industrial people. And that's what really has driven the prices up in this area in a big way.
Okay. Questions or comments from the committee? Alderman Warren.
And the intent is residential?
Residential.
Yeah.
Totally, just residential. And then with our control, we would be sure that it's residential.
And residential is the single-family, multi-unit dwelling that you guys...
Single-family townhouse, the very, very strong market, with what's going on pricing-wise. And that's why you see all around, if when you drive around, you see a lot of these units, kind of the kind of product that we're doing over there at Liberty Meadows and stuff like that. It's a typical kind of deal. And those things are economically still feasible despite the high costs right now.
And then is the intent, newer families, retirees, empty nesters, or all the above?
Both, yeah. Both. That's a very, kind of flexible product.
And then this is obviously going to tie into the improvements that are, because I think is that still in the two-lane portion of Bilter.
Correct, and that actually will help us with some of the right-of-ways
So,
that
yeah.
we're kind of negotiating as well,
yeah.
so.
So that whole thing will be tied in with that as well, too.
Yeah.
Any plans on extensions from anything that's north of that? You know, have you guys thought about that? Any road ties in or anything like that?
You know, not necessarily, you know, because, you know, there's been some plans and talks about a road there and connecting everything, but, you know, we'd like to keep the traffic down there and not necessarily make pass-throughs. So, you know, again, controlling the property as opposed to somebody else controlling the property,
Yeah.
I think would be easier in terms of doing that. But there were plans that showed that road going up there toward Ginger Woods and so on, but that's
Yeah.
not really what the plan is.
In full disclosure, obviously, that I live in Ginger Woods, and a lot of folks know that, obviously, I'm on the council, and that was their biggest concern when they heard rumblings of this kind of stuff. So,
Yeah, it just, we don't need it. We don't
Yeah.
need that road there. And that's, it's been shown as a, you know, some accessibility, but we've got Bilter, you know, it's a main road.
Perfect, yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, do we have a
Chairman.
motion? I'm sorry.
Just a quick question.
Alderman Bate?
Thank you, Chairman. So the properties east to this are also unincorporated, or they're cities?
They're unincorporated as well. I mean, the ones immediately to the east, I believe, are unincorporated. I'm not, I believe they are as well.
And they're all vacant?
Well, the ones to the, I'm sorry, yes, though, well, there's different, you know, some have houses on it. You know, when we looked at some of the other properties, they had fairly expensive houses,
Yes.
so it just didn't make sense to keep going to the east. So we figured these properties, when they had houses, they were less maintained houses, that was easier, you know, less tied up. There were houses, I think we looked just to the east, they were like $700-something thousand. So it wouldn't make sense to buy that, and, because then you're gonna knock the house down, and it just didn't make sense. And they weren't for sale.
Okay. Thank you, that's all.
Yep. All right, anything else?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion by Alderman Bate.
Second.
We have a second by Alderman Tolliver. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0.
Thanks
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you.
Pardon?
The next one is information only.
Okay. Next item is 24-0490, an update on matters related to the formation and making of a recommendation as to fixing of compensation of elected officials pursuant to the Local Government Officer Compensation Act.
Good afternoon, Finance Committee. Alex Voigt with the Mayor's Office. At the last Finance Committee, we discussed options in terms of reviewing how best to proceed with the annual review, if you will, of the compensation for our elected officials. The Finance Committee directed staff to reach out to our external vendor who conducts payroll studies on behalf of the city, and they are able to do such a study for our elected officials, and the details are laid out in the memo, including the cost. So if this is how the Finance Committee would like to proceed, then what we would propose would be to put an item for approval on new business at Committee of the Whole on Tuesday in order to meet the deadline of, I believe, August was what we were looking at. In the memo, it is noted it would take 2 to 3 weeks, they estimate, and then we can bring that information back to the committee for review. And with that, I will take questions, and I do have Liz Coronado, the Director of Human Resources, here if there are questions on specifics in terms of how the study works.
Questions or comments from the committee?
I have a question.
Alderman Tolliver.
From looking at this and then just discussing with some of my friends that sit on other city councils, like close to us, I've noticed that, like, some of the trustees, for instance, like, they don't do nearly as much as we do, so their compensation is completely less, even though, like, Streamwood is right next to us, so to speak, or not right next to us, but down the street from us. So when it says create a custom peer group of 15 Midwest cities comparable in size to Aurora, the size is not necessarily what I'm thinking of. It's more so like the duties of what these other council members do. Like, they don't have shred events, back to school. They don't do all those things that we do.
Yes.
No disrespect to them, but they show up, they vote, they do their job, and then they go home.
So that's a great question. So what's unique about this is it said Midwest cities comparable in size, but there was also a point about complexity. So Whereas when we've done the study internally, we looked specifically at cities in Illinois. They would be looking at the Midwest as a region, so it would probably include cities outside of Illinois with comparable duties, similar population, those sorts of things. So they would be taking a look at Aurora specifically and then finding communities in similar situations, but it could and probably most likely would include cities outside of Illinois.
Alderman Bug.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, of course, comparable size. So I guess we have to formulate what our comparable size is. In my mind, it's 198,000 plus, 198 to 203.
We like 200.
Okay, to 203, that range. So yes, that's, I think, our starting point. We're not back at that nebulous number that came up a couple years ago. I just came back from a conference with the Black Caucus of elected officials across the country. Just so happened a number of them that I talked to were in similar markets as us, and we discussed many different things. But one of those things was, well, that I brought up, because I knew I was coming to this meeting today, was salary. And I was just looking at pretty much 190,000 to 210,000 across the country, not just in the Midwest. Although Midwest, Grand Rapids, Michigan is about our size. They're at 32.5 now and going to bump up from that. So there are a number of them. When I found out West Salt Lake City is actually smaller than us. And one takeaway is that there are a number of councils who have a large number of duties, as Alderman Tolliver said. They've kind of seen the progress since 2020, and of course, what our country had to go through, and thus what elected officials had to go through. So a number of councils have not your normal measure of a 5% increase or something like that. Tacoma, Washington has a proposal right now for a 20% increase. Salt Lake City, like I said, has a 25% increase. They're looking at going from 42,000 to 53,000. Salt Lake City is actually smaller than Aurora. Rochester, New York is a little bit above 200,000. They're at 56K a year. Des Moines, very similar. Next door, and I'm sure that's the number they'll look at, they're at 35 now, and they're looking to go up from there. So those are just kind of some measures where our starting point is. And, you know, like I said, a number of councils are looking at making up room. There was one council, and I don't even remember who it was. They were way below, about our size, about 190,000. They were at, say, about 15,000 in 2020, and they just went ahead and doubled it to kind of catch up, and then they're going to move on from there. So we're not the only ones looking at this. There's councils across the country doing this right now, understanding what this job entails. So I appreciate all your work, and we look forward to the information coming out.
So I would say that's very interesting what you mentioned. Did you know if those were full-time jobs or part-time, what they were considered?
Those most of the time were considered part-time.
Part-time, okay.
Part-time-ish jobs.
Okay.
There are others that are like the 250 range, 250,000 population. And I assume those were more full-time, say St. Paul, Minnesota, which is about 270, I think. And their salary's like 120,000.
Okay.
So,
So-
as Carl and I, you and I discussed a little bit, even as we get this Hay study back, if you get a full Hay study back on a full-time position and then cut that number in half, we'll see where we're at. We all know how many hours of work we work, but you know, it's kind of looking at all the numbers and seeing where we play out.
So one of the things we were just discussing here is there are a number of different forms of government, and every city is a bit unique. So I think that'll be something, you know, as you point out, that we'll have to certainly work through as part of this process as well. So just for the sake of adding that to the conversation. But you are correct. Even locally, there are a number of communities that have just completed a study and have recommended increases. So I mean, it's that time right now. So certainly we're not alone in that regard.
So I would say, you know, I've done this for a couple of times now. I know Alderman Bug has with me too. So there's variables here. You know, Alderman Tolliver mentioned our duties. Well, we're not mandated to do back-to-school events. We're not mandated to do ice cream socials. So that's always a strange one to factor in, because I don't do either one of those. So do I do less? So I think when we do this, we're going to say, what is the basic amount we do, or we're mandated to do, because our salary is going to be based on what we're mandated to do. That's a variable. When Alderman Bugg said about these different towns, all right, well, if they make X amount, how many aldermen or alderwomen do they have per town? I mean, all of those things come into, you know, the place. So there's a lot to figure out. So I'm really a big fan of doing this Hay study, because they will kind of dot the I's and cross the T's for us in some of this. And even though 23,000, I guess it's not a lot, but it kind of is a lot, I think that'll be the basis going forward. So we probably want to do that every 4 years, you know, we get a base of where we should be. Because I guess in my mind, what I think we should all do is, right, what should our salary be, period? And then once we get it to where we believe it should be, then you can do the 2.5% to 3.5% cost of living, because we're where we need to be. I don't know if we've ever felt where we need to be quite yet, but the Hay study will help us with that. So I don't want to make this more complicated than it is, but there are a lot of things we're going to be considering. I mean, there just is. And all these things you brought up are wonderful, but doing that Hay study based on all this is kind of good for us.
Yeah. I have one comment as well, too. So keep in mind, too, that, you know, our basic duties are, you know, meetings and such, and the reason that we do a lot of those extracurricular activities is due to the ward funds that we get, which is very unique.
Sure.
You know, not only in Illinois, but throughout the Midwest. So I know we wouldn't be doing many shred events and what have you if we didn't have the funds for it, you know. So,
Right.
I mean, another variable, too, that I think needs to be
Absolutely.
considered, so.
Mr. Alexandru.
I think we're going to do our best to come up with as comprehensive a comparable database as possible, knowing that, like AV said, these aren't all cookie cutter governments, right? But my experience over the years, the size of a town does generally correlate to the larger a town, the more complicated the duties and requirements, but it then goes back to one of the points about what's the role of the mayor, what is the role of the alderman in these types of governments, right? We have strong mayor, strong manager form. We have all these different hybrids out there. We were in a meeting earlier today with some colleagues from Batavia, and I was stunned to find out that Batavia has 14 aldermen,
Yes.
right? And Aurora has 10 and 2, so 12. So it just, again, we're going to try, and HR, and, you know, my background in HR's role with Hay, I'm confident we'll come back, and then if there's some tweaking that needs to be done, redirection, we will certainly do that. So we're just, I think, today looking for direction to move forward so that then HR would prepare an item for COW and
Right.
council approval.
Well, since we're not voting anything today, will we get a consensus of the committee to say move forward with looking at Hay? Because I think that would really help us out, because we can nickel and dime this every 4 years, but having a professional come out there and say, this is what we're seeing, and then going from that, whatever they bring us, because if they bring us saying you're making too much money, well, we'd have to evaluate that. I don't think they would, but that's what we'd have to take a look at. So you just don't know what you're going to get. But I think the Hay study has been good in the past for other things, so I believe in them. And if we can't get that study for a while, I shouldn't say a while, but we could still start talking about the process and going through it if we didn't have the Hay study, and then we can kind of get things in order a little bit, and then when the Hay study comes in, we can kind of work with that in addition. I'd hate to lose any time with this going forward, but because we probably have data. I definitely have data from before, and I will tell everybody how we compare to Joliet, how we compare to Elgin, because those are more local ones, and why we did what we did in the past. So we can probably start that a little bit, and then when the Hay study comes in, we can boom, just jump on that and go.
We do have those numbers. They were updated. You shared the information that you had from the last time we did this exercise, and we did start to pull together our normal comparables, our standard numbers that we use. So we'll add that we'll give that to HR to add to the file for Tuesday.
Yeah.
And then it does say 2 to 3 weeks, so
Yeah.
hopefully we'll have something back that the finance committee can then review and then make a recommendation from there.
When you say 2 to 3 weeks, is that for the hay study?
Yes.
So we'll have another meeting in 2 weeks, I believe, for here. So we could have that stuff that I gave you, put in the packet, and start taking a look at that in case the hay study's not done yet? That type of thing? Get a head start on it?
So I can add the comparable communities to the item for approval that we'll put forward on Tuesday.
Okay, all right,
Yeah, and then just for the sake of
sure.
having the information.
Right.
And then we'll keep the finance committee updated on the progress of the Hay study.
Right. And we'll also be looking, I think we have to remember the mayor's salary too?
Yes,
Right,
so the
right,
mayor
right.
and the city council will
Sure,
be
right.
handled separately, but at the same time.
But at the same time, okay.
Yep.
All right, good. Any other questions or comments? Alderman Buck?
Yeah, just quickly, you brought up something that made me think of something else that we discussed, and I was actually surprised at. When I looked at a number of large towns, a number of them were still all elected at large, which surprised me. And that definitely changes your duties, but more so your responsibility. Because being a ward alderman, of course, there's a reason all of our information is on the city website. So when you're at large, nothing against those towns, but you call into a general number and you get whoever. When you have a ward alderman, district, whatever that city is calling it, they call that ward alderman or that district person, and they are responsible for that area.
Yeah.
And of course, that changes your duty drastically. You're accountable. You're accountable, unfortunately, 24/7. That's what our residents feel, and that's the case. So that's another important aspect for hay and the
Yeah, there's
people
certainly a
looking
lot
at
of
that.
variables to
Yeah,
consider.
definitely,
Yep,
definitely.
absolutely.
Well, and we'll discuss this further, but you bring up another good point. If you're an alderman in the city of Aurora and you're a geographic alderman, you might be, and you have 20,000-ish people in your ward, you could be considered the mayor of a 20,000 person town. I mean, you could actually look through that lens. And so that's another variable. I mean, what does a mayor in a 20,000 town, make? I mean, so there's a lot of things. There's so many moving parts, but that's what we're gonna have to go over. All very well deserved to be looked at, but at the end of the day, we need to pare it down to get where we're at. So there are more things that are gonna come through your minds as you walk out here today. I'm thinking, yeah, about that too. So we got a lot to go through. We get through it pretty good, but we got a lot to talk about, so.
Just a
Alderwoman
couple
May?
of things. So since we never had a hay study for this type of role, it'll be definitely a good thing that we are having it first time. In finance committee, it's information only and it goes to COW for approval. Just for my understanding.
Sure.
On
So-
less than 50,000, it doesn't come to council for approval and this type of thing is coming. So
Because it's unbudgeted, it's not
Okay.
an expense that was planned for. I asked the CFO the very same question. He said, yes, we do need to bring it forward for approval. But what we wanted to do here, since we had it as a discussion item, was make sure this is the path the committee wanted to take, and then we'll take it forward for formal starting on Tuesday. Very similar discussion. It will just be a resolution instead of information only.
And this will be the first time for alderman as well as mayor's position
For a hay study.
Okay.
Yes, we've handled this process a number of different ways, and some of them included external parties, but in terms of a company that has a formal salary study method, this will be the first, yes.
And Batavia has 2 aldermen per ward, just
Yeah.
Yeah, they have,
they're 14 and
I
7
don't know
wards
how
and-
many wards they have, but
Yeah,
I was quite surprised they had 14 aldermen.
yeah, they have 2 per ward.
Yeah.
And I can tell you right now, I know a little bit about that. We work a little bit harder. We have a little bit more on our plate, and I'm being very conservative when I say that. Yeah. Anything else about that?
Just
Alderman Buck, go
a
ahead.
question, when you said that. I know we didn't do a hay study before on the mayor's salary.
Right.
But a couple mayors ago, I thought we did, not a hay study, but a full comprehensive study when there was
You know
a
what?
large increase.
You are correct, and that predates me, but I know Alex could answer questions about that one. There was I believe the chamber ran that one. So we worked with local partners.
Your recollection is spot on. We did a more broader review using the third party, which was the chamber at the time. And then they brought back recommendations with data and evidence about comparable duties, and they made recommendations. But as I recall, not all those recommendations were not uniformly adopted, they were modified. And unfortunately, they were modified down. So there was great evidence to do it then, but there were other factors, the economy, the city's budget. So when one could argue that, and it's just like on the employee side, when we first started talking years ago about bringing in hay, because up until that point, we had had some economic issues. We did a 0 1 year. So when you do those kinds of things and you don't keep up with the times, that's where you start to fall behind, and then it accumulates. And so it was the same thing on the elected side. So that's why I think you'll see a variety of responses probably in the Hay study, probably in large part because in some cases we weren't consistent. Much as we wanted to be, the numbers just weren't there to support it financially.
Sure. And I would say this to the Hay study, I'm assuming they're gonna take everything into consideration, because it's compensation, because we can't forget health insurance is there, and life insurance, and all those things that we get. So if somebody's making 30,000, we're making 28, we get health insurance, they don't, now you gotta factor that into the total package. So I mean, I'm assuming they'll take that into consideration too, but.
They will, but if I recall, I'd have to check this with legal, but I think the pure item that comes for council to meet the requirements of the law is strictly the salary portion. I
Right.
don't think it's
not the benefit
the
package.
benefits or
Right.
compensation.
But we may think about that when we do it. It's not gonna be based on a mandate.
Well,
But
sure.
But, if we're like, hey, we're at the top of the scale, and that's not including health insurance, nobody else is getting, we have to take the consideration, because we have to be reasonable about it too. So we would definitely do that, but yeah, okay. All right. Good.
But I mean, I know there was years ago, Alderman Seville, I think, would remember this, years ago, there was a separate council action to establish the health insurance benefits provided to elected officials.
All right, okay.
So that didn't have anything to do with these compensation studies per se.
Sure. Okay. Anything else on this topic?
Would you adjourn?
All right, thank you
Second.
very much.
So
We'll
we'll
be
move
waiting for
forward
COW, for
with
COW.
HR for COW.
Nothing else before coming
Thank
before
you.
the Finance Committee. We have a motion to adjourn by Alderman Bug.
Second.
Second by everybody else. I'll just name a name for the clerk. Alderman Warman. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? And we are adjourned at 3:34. Thank you.